Hey guys, Aaron Miles here with the Daily Mileage. Today we're going to talk a bit about Scheherazade. You know, it was the best deck of last format, best deck of this format. We're going into Grand Prix Collinsville, so I kind of wanted to talk about, what has changed about the deck. Obviously, before it was this powerhouse of value and tempo, focusing on cards like Ginny, as well as big beaters like Ava, and, Ruin Story just generally getting a lot of value. So with those three cards getting banned, the deck has lost more than 25% of its cards as you played, maximum copies of each of those. So obviously, it's going to look totally different, so why is it still so oppressive? Short answer is Puppet Maker, but we're going to get into the long answer here in a minute. So, on top of those cards getting banned, True Blade of Spirits also got banned, which allowed Sacred Elf to creep its way back into the format. Now, initially, we all thought that this was going to be a big help for Lumia, something that had, historically abused Sacred Elf the most effectively, being able to use it as kind of a double mana dork. But it turns out just the tempo gained by Scheherazade by having this extra mana, being a deck that's a relatively low curve, being mostly 2-drops with a few 3-drops, the faster that they get to pump out multiple 2-drops, the better the deck is, especially with everything having quick cast. It kind of takes advantage of the Lumia factor in that your Sacred Elf won't be tapped on your opponent's turn for them to attack. Now, normally, like, Sacred Elf in a deck like FoW is kind of like whatever, or literally any other deck, because you play it, and then it's like, okay, well, if I want to use this for ramp, then I'm putting it in a vulnerable position to be attacked. Lumia gets around that because it flickers the Sacred Elf at end of turn, and Scheherazade gets around that by just playing all of the cards on your opponent's turn. Specifically at their end step, or during their combat phase, and then, I'm blocking with the thing that I'm cheating in anyway, so it's not like the Sacred Elf was tapped at the beginning of combat for you to get around that. So Sacred Elf actually, it was something that we saw in earlier iterations of the Scheherazade deck back in March, when Ben Bargetski won Grand Prix Montreal with it. I believe he had Sacred Elves in his list, and then, as people picked up on True Blade being a good card, and we started to see like 3 or 4 of that pop up in every main deck, it kind of fell to the wayside. And then Puppet Maker, kind of the opposite. It's something that we saw pop up at the end of the format, where people were just kind of looking for an advantage in the mirror, mostly kind of getting on that, like, I want my dolls to be a little bit bigger than my opponent's dolls, and then, the also draws are nice. And True Blade against that was just a 2-mana removal spell, which it's interesting to see that kind of, theory fall to the wayside. Sure, you could True Blade it and Tama it, which was probably a big part back then. Nobody's really running Tama anymore because there's not a lot of point without True Blade. But, there are still 2-mana removal spells for the Puppet Maker, which is what True Blade itself was. We have Digestion, we have, I believe it's called Null Darkness, and Forbidden Arts. Now, those all kind of fall to the problem of, like, their colors suck. Digestion, it's obviously the best one of those 3, if we're talking specifically to deal with Puppet Maker, but the problem is, it's really weak against Keurig, which, while we didn't really see a whole lot of Keurig at Grand Prix Atlantic City, I do think you're going to see a high representation of Keurig going into Grand Prix Collinsville. It's just smaller sample sizes, law of averages, all that kind of stuff. I would assume that if Grand Prix Collinsville is 100 players, I would say you're probably going to see about 35 Scheherazade and probably like 27 Keurig, or just my arbitrary guesses on that, because, Force Bowl players love their random stuff, so the other 50 slots are taken. But, the point being, you're not going to see a whole lot more Scheherazade throughout the course of the tournament than you are Keurig, especially with Pathway Part being probably the most effective answer to Puppet Maker within the format, and just dolls in general. If I throw down my Patrolling Guard doll, I tap out for that to, like, block your dude, and you just bounce it for 1 mana. That's not great for me. But mostly just killing the Puppet Maker for 1 mana is one of the, it's very powerful ability, and really only Keurig has access to. And, Heteroclite Excalibur exists, and that's really only a good answer for Puppet Maker, whereas Pathway Part is a good answer for the dolls as well. And the reason that I say that it's only a good answer for Puppet Maker is the same reason that Final Battle is kind of mediocre against Scheherazade if you're not playing Scheherazade yourself, and that's because the dolls will come down at the end of your turn, hit you in the face, and then you have to answer them after they've already gotten an attack off. And it's the same reason that Final Battle isn't great against aggro. These creatures essentially have swiftness. But getting out of that and into my next point, Seed of Rebirth, card that is extremely powerful because it's a story. If it wasn't a story, whatever. But the fact that it is a non-quick cast card, so you can't Fey or spell it, and I just get to revive a Puppet Maker and either a newly... So, like, Sacred Elf wasn't played before, it's played again, so, like, there are 1-drops back in the deck. The fact that I can instant speed a revival Lorite in a way that you cannot Fey or spell is an extremely powerful ability. And Last Audience, not a card that I thought would actually see play, but, once I started playing the deck and having a 1-drop card to play alongside Puppet Maker to just get that free draw, or, like, God forbid I have out 2 Puppet Makers and I just get to throw that down and draw 2 cards, it feels really, really nice. And then its abilities are, like, nothing ignorable either. But the point being, Seed of Rebirth is an extremely powerful card. If I bring back Last Audience with Puppet Maker, I will get the draw because they both hit the field at the same time. Seed of Rebirth is just a huge thing that you need to worry about. So how do you kind of answer that when you don't have, graveyard interaction? Because, Uprising's really Uprising's kind of a weird card for Scheherazade to throw into its extra deck, just because like I feel like you kind of need Approach as that guaranteed turn 1 play to keep you up in the Scheherazade mirror, as well as outvalue other decks. Scarlet's Agony, if you don't play that, you're probably going to have a rougher time against like Keurig and IU specifically, and you know, getting the extra draw is always good in the mirror or any other matchup. Like those are just having those 2 draw cards in your extra deck are going to always be really good for you. You need to have Seed of Rebirth. I think that card's just too powerful. Black Tears is something that I've been valuing a lot because of all the Sacred Elf decks popping up. You know, FoW is a deck that we saw. And then Uprising, it kind of fights for Last Days of a Powerless Dragonoid for that last slot, which just makes Seed of Rebirth all the more powerful. However, if you want to tune your extra deck to beat a matchup, then I would say Evil Elemental Uprising over Last Days if you're expecting a lot more Scheherazade, and I would say you could probably even cut Black Tears for Uprising, go Uprising and Last Days of a Powerless Dragonoid if you're expecting a lot of Keurig, because Uprising, of course, helps against the Play Dead. That's the card. I knew that there was a card that Keurig played from Grave. But yeah, so back to the point. The thing that you're looking to do is Exile Puppet Maker, which, you know, Heteroclite Excalibur is like good for, Burn to Cinders is good for. Those are actually the only 2. Those are the only 2 cards I can think of that exile a Resonator on the field. That's not good. That's not good for us. You know, Shade. Shade might not even be like a terrible card to play in the main. You know, it helps against Keurig. Not a lot because like Keurig's got that awkward 700 defense threshold again. Whereas, you know, it'll kill Puppet Maker, but the chances of you reviving the Shade with its own ability is pretty slim to none. But there's no True Blade, so like it's not terrible to play again. Just throwing that out there. But obviously, like, Heterocliting a Puppet Maker is what I would call your best bet, because obviously Scheherazade is going to be running 4 Fair Spell. Not every deck, I think, has to run 4 Fair Spell. If you want to beat Scheherazade, like, it's the best card against Scheherazade, for sure. But they have to run it to combat your Fair Spells, so they're going to have those. And then Heteroclite getting around that, I think, is a very valuable tech choice that I would definitely recommend trying out. Not just in Scheherazade, but any black deck that you're running. If you want to run something that's not Keurig or Scheherazade, then you're probably playing Time Spinning Witch, so you're not playing black. But if you're not playing any of those 3, then you're probably playing black, and you can play Heteroclite Excalibur. But the last thing that hasn't changed about Scheherazade is the flip. The flip is still probably the most powerful enter ability of any J ruler in the game still. You know, that's the problem that we had with Fair, was like, oh my god, he comes in and he pulls out a 4-drop, what the fuck, he's only 3 mana, and then Scheherazade's 3 mana and she pulls out a 5-drop and another 3-drop or lower, or 4-drop if you play Eve, all that kind of stuff. Basically, she just pulls out potentially up to 10 mana worth of guys on her flip, and it's 3 separate abilities, so you can't lorite it. So Dawn of the Earth is actually something that I think is kind of in a good spot right now. It's kind of awkward to play blue-white, but hear me out. If you can manage to do it, then you can hit Grounder Supremacy, pulling out a Pile-Alley. You can even do it on Pile-Alley's Awakening to pull out a mid-pig. You can use it on Big Pig's effect to pull out the little pigs. And then Scheherazade will shut down both of the abilities, which is, you know, very relevant. Because if I flip my Scheherazade and all I gotta do is put something back on top, I feel like an idiot. You know, shutting that down is huge. And also the get rid of all 0-drops is probably one of the better answers to 0 in the format as far as main deck goes. And then, you know, it'll self-replace no matter what. And, you know, obviously, like, it's probably not going to find its way into any deck, because even the Bant Fair combo decks that we saw last format with, or not last format, but the format before Scheherazade, R2 format, you know what I mean? The Bant Fair deck that would run Dawn of the Earth and try to kill you with all the Fair counters has kind of been replaced by the green-black-white Fair deck, and Resuscitating will, but you know, managing the flip is definitely something that you need to look out for. And I think that there are a few okay answers to that. Like, I think bounce spells are better against Scheherazade than people give them credit for, although they need to be self-replacing, and this is usually in a big way to combat Puppet Maker. When I play my doll and commit my resources to that, you want to bounce my Puppet Maker in response so that I miss out on the draw, but you can't just be using things like Shayla's Return to do it, because then you're actually just neg-1ing yourself every time. It's the reason that bounce spells generally aren't very good. However, there are some time-spinning witch cards. I know there's one specifically, the Dragon Lord's Breath, that draws a card because you awaken it with time mana, and I think that that is a very powerful tool for Time Spinning Witch to deal with this. Granted, I haven't played any Time Spinning Witch. I don't know what its good and bad matchups are. I don't know if it struggles with Scheherazade or Keurig more. I would assume it struggles with Keurig more, so maybe this isn't as relevant to that, but who knows? Not me. I'm sure some of you do. You've definitely played the deck more than I have, because I've played it 0, but that deck looks super fun, and I wish I could play it, but I have to keep winning things, so I'm on Scheherazade until I die, I guess. but yeah, it's really managing your opponent's resources. You know, you need to be looking for when are they going for those suited Rebirth plays. Can I make sure that they don't get too much value off Puppet Maker? Zero, actually. Zero the King's Blade is, I think, a pretty powerful tool to deal with that. It takes out a lot of the value of Puppet Maker. Not all of it, because they're really going to be playing the dolls on your turn, so like they'll get one draw on your turn, one draw on their turn. But you know, it definitely helps stem the bleeding until you get to a point where you can deal with all of these threats. And I really think that's going to be the name of the game for the weekend, is deal with Puppet Maker. And you know, Keurig might be the best deck to do that, just because the Pathway part is so powerful. If they want, they have access to Burn Descenders, which is one of the more effective removal spells against Puppet Maker, because they have to, you know, kind of balance out, am I using this Fair spell to protect my doll against your Fair spell, or am I using it to protect my Puppet Maker after you Fair spelled my doll? You know, it's definitely a choice that you have to make them make, and when you make your opponent make more decisions, then they have more of a chance to screw up. So, I mean, that's really my thoughts on the matter. I don't really have a lot else to say. Ryan kind of threw this on me last minute. But yeah, for the Daily Mileage, I'm Aaron Miles, and good luck in Collinsville this weekend.